Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Hashker, coming to you today from Sydney, Australia. I'm the APAC practice lead for application modernisation with Google Cloud, and in this What's Hot session, I'm going to take you through some of the very latest innovations in Google Cloud's application modernisation and development landscape, and how they can improve the daily productivity for developers and IT practitioners just like you. As always, feel free to ask our Google experts any questions during my session in the text box below the video. The team is standing by to answer live, and if you'd like to continue the conversation on social media, please be sure to tag us with the hashtag Google Cloud Tech Series. Finally, be sure to look out for our interactive quiz questions in the sessions along the way. Jay and Ewan will take us through the results a little later, so let's jump in. So, application modernization, what's hot? Everyone is a developer, in my view. I feel like we're talking to so many different roles within organizations around code and the use of code, but what does that all mean? So today we're going to cover off a couple of different themes, and some of the hot things that you're likely to hear in this session are going to cover off things like serverless technologies, maybe CI/CD, observability, multi-cloud, and migration. Maybe it's migration to Kubernetes, maybe it's migration of code. And then also we'll finish up with API-centric approaches. So let's jump straight into it. Now, you've likely heard of the first generation of cloud-native technologies. Typically, many organizations have been driving down this road for quite some time. It's been oriented towards virtualized infrastructure, maybe infrastructure as code, configuration management, single cloud management for cloud-native workloads. But what's next? I guess if we think about the second generation of cloud native, it's all about applications and sustainable scale. So I'm thinking virtualized namespaces, configuration as data, event-driven architectures, and security by design. There's a lot more to it, but just as a brief summary, those are some of the things that we'll be covering off today. So if we think about DevX, or simply put, developer experience, it's really the understanding and reduction of friction between an idea created and the value delivered. So it's these competing forces which makes this space and our role as trusted advisors so interesting. And essentially we're trying to bridge the gap between those 2 points. So what does success actually look like? I think that many organizations are trying to drive more efficiency, greater scale, better developer productivity to serve revenue-generating applications for our consumers. Maybe they'd like to add features and fix defects a lot quicker. There are really strong priorities in reducing the attack surface area and improving security, and maybe increasing uptime and helping to achieve application SLAs a lot better. So if we think about how we're going to drive towards these improvements, there are a couple of key metrics that organizations are looking at. And all of this is based on DOOR research, the DevOps Research and Assessment Organization. Now, for those of you not familiar with these, they're typically oriented towards deployment frequency, lead time for changes, time to restore a service, and change fail rate. These are incredibly relevant to organizations and developers today, especially the first 3 in measuring and making improvement for your development experience. So if we try to boil this down to 3 key points, essentially what we're trying to offer here is delivering better scale and security through integrated self-service experiences, cloud native and traditional friendly platforms. So what does that look like with a view on serverless? Now the serverless family on Google Cloud Platform has started with the basis of App Engine as a serverless 1.0 platform. It allows you to run source-based web applications on a fully managed environment. But serverless 2.0 is, I guess, a little bit more inclusive. Beyond the build and run of running on a serverless platform, like Cloud Run, built on open source Knative, Cloud Functions, where you could connect and extend your cloud services, and Cloud Build for serverless CI/CD. There's a lot more to think about around the orchestration piece. Maybe Cloud Workflows to have that declarative service orchestration, Cloud Tasks for that asynchronous task execution, and maybe Event Arc for asynchronous event delivery. Now, the connection piece is also critical to this journey, and we're seeing a very strong focus on serverless messaging with Cloud Pubs Hub, VPC access for serverless networking, and API gateways too. Now, we'll recap on our portfolio options in the next slide so you can see the differential between them. Now, some common use cases for these serverless compute products are typically oriented towards the type of app that you're going to run. Now, if you're choosing to run a web app or HTTP services, maybe Cloud Run is going to be the best option for you. Web apps are typically driven towards App Engine, while functions might be more oriented towards workflow and orchestration and event-driven reactive automation. Now, I guess if we consider developing APIs and having an API for both web and mobile backends, it's probably important to weigh up, do we need data processing as part of that, or are we just happy with API for web and mobile backends and internal APIs for services, in which case you'd maybe choose App Engine. Now, to simplify the approach, we're going to think about 3 key points to help our business grow. So faster time to value, getting new products and features to consumers, having a fully managed environment to lower that total cost of ownership, and require less overhead for setup, for maintenance, scalability, and security. Automating security is also part of the journey, where we're seeing a need to verify the software supply chain, policies in declarative form, and proactive vulnerability testing. So who are some of the individuals that are thinking about this developer-led economy that we're talking about? Well, obviously developers fall right into that mix, but also we're seeing a policy-led code-based approach from security professionals and also an infrastructure approach with operators. Now, the goals for each of these roles are typically combined to provide the overall strategy for the applications we're hosting. Now, if we think about the goals for operations teams, typically they're thinking about how to standardize, how teams are onboarded and applications are deployed and maintained. Whereas security teams are looking to propagate policy and authorization in a centralized place and apply that policy broadly across all of the application teams. Whereas developers are probably more interested in deploying and iterating on their applications autonomously and in isolation, and removing bottlenecks to getting their code out to the community. Now, let's have a look at a modern CI/CD workflow, starting with container registry. All changes to the system start with a code change in a central source code repo. Now, if you think about the developer, typically they're taking their continuous integration through to their container registry. Changes for devs are usually going to be to the application code itself. The code gets committed and then run through CI, where it's tested and an artifact, maybe a container image, is built. The Docker image gets built and pushed to a container registry where it's stored until it's time to deploy. Now, for operations, they're typically going to be focused on the application configuration, flags, configuration, CPU, memory, etc. They also make these changes through a commit. The config is managed via customize. Once the image is built, customize will replace the image, and its manifests and store the result in an intermediate Git repository. So once stored there, essentially we've got a GKE deploy to apply all of that config to the target clusters. Security changes will then happen with the configuration management repository and get committed and sync that policy across all clusters in the fleet. So let's take a view here around CI/CD with Cloud Build. Essentially, we've got a similar view without the personas and the roles, but essentially centralizing all of that source code from Cloud Code through to automating the CI/CD and DevOps workflows with Cloud Build. Then choosing to run on our chosen platform, whether that's Google Kubernetes Engine, GKE, App Engine, Cloud Run functions, or some of the others. Now, we also need to consider where we are storing some of those builds through artifact registry, container registry, and cloud storage. So essentially, our view here is we make it simple, scalable, and secure. Now, from an observability perspective, there are many organizations that are looking to get better visibility around the applications that they are hosting and serving the application well so it can deliver value to consumers. Now, I'm finding that service monitoring based on Google SRE principles really helps understand the application better. So we give out-of-the-box guidance for defining service level objectives, error budgets, and defining alerts for GKE and Anthos-based services. So we could auto-discover services built using Anthos Service Mesh, Istio on GKE, and App Engine, and we can define alerts on error budget burn rate. One other aspect is focusing on custom dashboards. So having an easy-to-use custom chart and dashboard with the new dashboard editor gives you 7 different chart types. You can dynamically resize the charts, you've got drag and drop editing, you've got mix and match resource and metric in the dashboard, and the full power of MQL available in the dashboard. So this should really simplify the view that helps us understand our metrics better. But how do we evaluate how a service is actually behaving and the result that it's actually going to be promoting out to our consumers of the app? Now, dashboards powered by metadata, relationships, metrics, logs, alerts, and incidents are really going to be key to help us identify the top and most unhealthy entities organized by, say, the GKE entity category. We could filter through the context graphs based on GKE entity relationships, but we've got that unified solution for correlating alerts, metrics, and logs, all in the one view. So observability is one of those key aspects that should really be part of the developer experience. And developers should be providing views into the operations teams to ensure that the observability platform is monitoring the key aspects of the application. So one other aspect, I guess, that we're seeing across many strategies with developers and organizations is this preference for deploying portable applications flexibly across multi-cloud. Now, scaling multi-cloud management across teams is potentially quite complex. You've got your app development combined with your alerts and your business data, operational data. You've got to troubleshoot, optimize, automate. There are many different things that make it quite challenging to go and manage at scale. So if we think about Anthos, Anthos is a Kubernetes-based platform that runs everywhere you do with a cloud-backed control plane for centralized management. So we're providing all of those views on application management, infrastructure automation, end-to-end observability, and compliance and governance. Now, the main value here is that Anthos can manage where your deployment is, whether it's on Google Cloud, other clouds, maybe public clouds that you're already using or choosing to use due to compliance requirements. On premises, whether that's on top of a vSphere-based environment or bare metal, attached clusters for attaching to other public clouds, independent of, Google Kubernetes Engine. You could use the Kubernetes flavor of your choice, or maybe on-prem, with some other conformant Kubernetes options too. Now, if we dive a little bit further into some of the features here, the key things that we're seeing driving towards those points of security and zero trust, logging, having those service level objectives available for monitoring include maybe a managed service mesh. Anthos Service Mesh is based on open source Istio, but with enterprise grade scale and production support. So we've got the ability to manage traffic, routing, load balancing, and have an AI-driven insight, recommendation, and operation analytics engine to give you that telemetry out of the box, give you some insights around the policies that you're applying, encrypting traffic between your microservices, which means that there's no more hard coding of configuration and policies. The other aspect is GitOps at scale. So in speaking to many organizations, they love the idea of pulling down their configuration from a central source repository and pushing it out to all of their clusters. So Anthos Configuration Management is a GitOps automation suite that provides policy and configuration at scale. So essentially, you're taking your YAML manifest as policy and you're deploying it across all of your managed clusters with that end-to-end auditability, CI peer review, and policy as code. So you can manage all your cloud infrastructure, not just your Kubernetes apps with this. Now, if we think about some AI, AI is typically extending many of the applications that we're building today. Hybrid AI for Anthos provides you that view across hybrid cloud So you can have AI and ML training with inferencing capabilities with a one-click deployment. So it'll give you pre-trained AI models created by teams of Google PhDs into any Anthos environment via the Anthos marketplace. So it'll give you things like the ML code integrated with data verification, monitoring, analysis tools, feature extraction, and data collection. Now, think about where you're going to host your app. Now, if you're running a containerized based application with the self-healing auto repair capabilities of Kubernetes, Google Kubernetes Engine, or GKE, is leading Kubernetes innovation. What we're seeing is this demand for scale in modern environments. And GKE can scale to up to 15,000 node clusters, outscaling competition by up to 15 times. It's the industry first to provide four-way autoscaling, release channels, and multi-cluster support as well. So let's think about modernization strategies. If we think about the approaches that organizations are taking today, maybe you need to evacuate your data center, or you've got a preference to build new applications on public cloud. There are some things we might need to do to optimize the dependencies, modernize them as we move to our chosen state. Now, that chosen state could be on-prem, could be in the cloud, and you should have some options to automate the migration of both those applications and potentially the code as well. So if we think about automating that migration, having a one-click VM migration approach is going to be key. It's going to simplify the view that developers need to take with that application code and rolling it out seamlessly onto that modern applications platform, built on top of GKE. So Migrate for Anthos essentially brings the power of containerization to existing workloads. You can migrate VMs running on VMware or AWS or Azure into containers managed by GKE in real time. It will automatically go and create those container images, YAML manifests, and a migration plan to get you from the virtual machine operating system that you're running your app on through to the container image on top of Kubernetes. So you can capitalize on increased resource utilization, unified logging, monitoring, and modern application lifecycle management tools. It'll support both legacy Linux and Windows VM applications too. Now, let's just say you've got some legacy code, and I guess you'd like to take that code and modernize the code itself. Now, we have a modernization approach using Google G4 tools that can help go and analyze some of that legacy code that you might have running. It might be a COBOL-based application or RPG, assembly, JCL, EasyTrieve. And now we can go and analyze that code and then give you a view on how much of that we can automate to a modern language, maybe like Java, which can then run on top of Kubernetes. So this is all available to go and review, discover, assess, and future-proof your environment. So let's think about APIs for a minute. In the developer ecosystem, I'm seeing a big demand for API products and monetization, an API marketplace, and maybe a catalog. But there's also a need for developer engagement metrics to correlate with business and operational metrics, in addition to API monitoring. A mediation engine provides us a capability of mapping security through APIs with transformation and orchestration, whereas an API runtime is going to give us that gateway, whether it's hybrid, enterprise, or micro gateway, and maybe some hosted targets. So what does the full API management lifecycle capability look like? Essentially, it's got to be a combination, from development aspect all the way through to security, publishing the API, scale, monitoring, analyzing, monetizing, and designing. So as a full circle capability, Apogee is essentially offering all of these things within the same single pane of glass view. Now, it shouldn't have to matter where you run this application and these APIs, whether it's on private cloud, with your federated gateway, whether it's on premises or in the public cloud. Essentially, you're leveraging Apogee as that managed service. Apogee Hybrid as a federated runtime will move Apogee's enterprise gateway capabilities to your private cloud or data center seamlessly. Whereas Apogee Istio Adapter will bring API management capabilities and services inside your Istio service mesh. So what does this look like if we think from the outside in? Essentially, with APIs becoming the standard, you've got to think outside in when publishing those to drive the fastest adoption. APIs need to be secure, discoverable across consumers, consumable in a self-service fashion, and easy to use. So underpinning that multi-cloud platform built atop of Anthos with Kubernetes Engine, your managed service mesh, your serverless capabilities, API management is that outer layer connecting your consumers to the platform. So to summarize what we've just talked about, we're essentially innovating to bring you simplicity at scale in 4 key areas. So the first area is at scale with GitOps, managing your growing fleet of infrastructure, having that declarative config, and deploying it across all of your clusters. Next step is around consistency with the Kubernetes resource model to build and manage infrastructure, apps, and managed services. First-party services everywhere. So Google services for data, analytics, AI, available in all of your environments. And then lastly, consumption flexibility, whether it's public or private cloud, hypervisor or bare metal, subscription or pay-as-you-go. We're essentially giving you cloud on your terms. So what can you do next? There are a couple of things that you can do to validate where you and your team and your organization are at. With regards to software delivery performance, you could go to cloud.google.com/DevOps and take the DORA DevOps Quick Check assessment. And it will give you a rating on some of those 4 key capabilities I talked about, from low all the way through to elite, based on all of the research we've done across 30,000 organizations. Now, if you focus on APIs, you could go to transform.apogee.com and evaluate the digital nature of your business. How digital is your business? You could find out in 3 minutes using the Apogee Compass assessment. And lastly, if you are considering containerizing your existing workloads, you'd like to look at the virtual machines running Windows, Linux, and the applications within them, we've got a containerization fit assessment tool. It'll give you a fit score between 0 to 10 and help you understand the differences between manual effort required versus automation for containerizing the workloads that you've got and saving developer effort in refactoring. And with that, I'll wrap up. I hope you're excited as we are by some of the latest innovations we covered. Coming up next, one of our great customer engineers, Sehon, will be joining our partners, MongoDB, to talk about serverless deployment on GCP. So stay tuned for that. Over to you.